Welcome to Major Label Debut. This here is the podcast about major label debuts and increasingly other things, such as today, a movie. That's right, it's your MLD Movie Club, watching Oliver Stone's seminal portrait of / exercise in Excess, starring Val Kilmer embodying the legendary Jim Morrison. And we ended up doing something a little different from just like watching the movie and John Paul and I talking about it, which was what I was assuming we would do. And then John Paul had a way more interesting idea, which was to link up with friend of the show, Bret Berg.
Name, occupation.
Jim. Things are about to explode. You can feel it in the air. Planet is screaming for change, Morrison. We gotta make the myths.
Bret is described by the great John Paul, who as always has a way with words, as a Los Angeles-based film, music, and video creative director and curator with a finger on the pulse of the weird, the compelling, and the esoteric. Bret wears many hats, including working at the American Genre Film Archive and also running the Museum of Home Video, which in their own words is 90 minutes of found footage for stoners, seekers, archivists, and drinkers. In other words, Bret is our kind of guy here at Major Label Debut. And as part of the Museum of Home Video, he does something he calls Fasterpiece Theater, wherein he takes a movie and chops it down. We thought it would be cool to get Bret to do just such a cut of Oliver Stone's 1991 masterpiece, The Doors, and he very kindly did it. And it's going to premiere on Tuesday night. If you're listening to this episode pretty soon after it comes out, the streaming premiere of Fasterpiece Theater, Bret Berg's cut-down edit of Oliver Stone's The Doors, is taking place Tuesday, September 2nd, in collaboration with Major Label Debut. We're presenting it. The Doors is a long movie, and it's a long movie that feels like a long movie, and that sort of seems to be by design. This is a movie that it's about a lot. It's self-consciously, much like the music of The Doors, it's serious, and it conducts itself as an important, epic depiction of something elemental about America, which is, that's your Oliver Stone playbook right there. Whether or not it succeeds and in what senses it succeeds is something that Bret and I get into. It's something that everyone has their own opinions about, but it definitely is long. So for Bret to try and cut it down to a lean, I think he got it to about exactly an hour, to cut it down that much, and what is left after that is a very interesting exercise and a very interesting act of film criticism and creativity and like post-facto collaboration. That's just the kind of like makes you stroke your chin intersection that I personally love.
Bring on you, I'm the Lizard King! I can do anything!
Mr. Morrison, I'd like to go make a record.
Sure, why not?
I was really thrilled to watch Bret's edit of The Doors. I think it's really fun. I think you guys will enjoy watching it if you tune in. That was just a beginning, because then talking to Bret about making the edit and about the movie The Doors and the music of The Doors and just like art and culture and commerce and all that in general was incredibly rewarding. Him and I really got along. We're really simpatico. I think we have a lot of the same ideas about this stuff, but Bret is way better at articulating it and understanding it than I am. This is a man who has truly immersed himself in it for his whole career, and you can tell from not just the depth of his knowledge, but the depth of his wisdom, if that's not glazing it a little too much. Anyway, I'll stop handing out superlatives and just throw, without further ado, to my conversation with Bret Berg about his Fasterpiece Theater edit of Oliver Stone's The Doors and lots more besides. Here it comes right about now. Bret, thank you so much for not just watching The Doors, the movie, but immersing yourself in The Doors, the movie, in order to create this fever dream edit that you made of it. And I think we were both, in our own ways, coerced by Major Label Debut producer and good guy John Paul Bullock into watching this movie, possibly as some sort of twisted game of his own. He seems to derive a sick pleasure from watching people watch Jim Morrison do his thing. What did you make of the Doors movie as you got inside it to break it down?
Well, something that struck me immediately upon this rewatch was that it's the most expensive rock biopic ever made. And the scope of this movie is huge. There's that one scene where it's like 2/3 of the way through and there's a huge concert, and there are at least a few thousand extras, like Ben-Hur, Cleopatra style, throughout this stadium. And there's like trash fires and people running around like it's Treasure Island and Pinocchio. And I'm like, damn, they don't make movies like this anymore, for sure. So I was really struck by they don't make movies like this anymore-ness of this movie upon the rewatch. Also, this was like peak Oliver Stone. You know, he made JFK directly after this. He won Oscars directly before this. And this was definitely the height of his career. And he decided to do this. And we are all the better or worse for it.
It was simultaneously the height of Oliver Stone mania and Oliver Stone's mania.
Absolutely. I'm not a fan of Natural Born Killers. I never was. People love the soundtrack more than the movie, I know. And, you know, that was kind of the beginning of the end for him. So this is while he's still riding high, almost as high as the peyote trip that they're taking in the movie. And this is the beginning of his a lot of his experimental techniques writ large. Previous movies of his had little burbles of it, like Talk Radio with Eric Bogosian is very stylized. Born on the 4th of July, very stylized. But this is like the first time when he's like rocking out with his cock out, basically, just like Jim Morrison in the movie.
It's such different subject matter for him to engage with. I mean, he does the same sort of like, it's really about America, Oliver Stone epic sweepingness with the subject matter, but it's really interesting to see him engage with pop culture and art and that end of things rather than politics and war and you know, as much as those things, maybe he's ahead of his time because those are all starting to collide in bizarre ways now, more literally. But what do you think it is about engaging with the Doors and Jim Morrison's story that compelled Oliver Stone? What does it seem like to you?
Well, it's an ultimate boomer tale for sure.
Yes.
And Jim Morrison kind of comes off like the ultimate pampered boomer rock star. And, you know, everyone puts up with his eccentricity / mania / mental illness / undiagnosed something or other. And, you know, everyone's so naive, and it feels like maybe Oliver Stone shares that naiveness, even though he's commanding this enormous film production and he's won Oscars. He does come off as somewhat naive in both this and JFK, and even in Natural Born Killers too. Yeah, I don't know. This is like right place, right time. You know, this was the era in which you could make $100 million budgeted rock biopic. So it's just the boomerness oozes off the screen. And I say that, you know, loving most of what the boomers made cultural product wise from the era. So I don't hate boomers. I'm just noticing that that's what this is. But did you pick up on that? Are you like sensitive to the boomer stuff?
Well, I think the fact that I'm a little more removed from it, and also I've lived my whole life in Canada where we're very like completely influenced by the pop culture of the United States, obviously, and my whole life has been like 100% Americanized. And yet, maybe because it was more diffuse in the 60s and 70s, but it feels like some of that like core boomer lifeblood, the thing that really informs the American boomers, you know, fulsome boomerness, is somehow diffused here in a way that makes it feel at arm's length. And my experience of the Doors kind of right from the jump was, geez, these guys are a lot. You know, I saw this movie for the first time literally at John Paul's apartment. I was in LA with my old band making a record. So already I was in that like in a completely skewed mindset where I was totally up my own ass, 'cause you'd spend 12 hours a day making, like, stroking your chin and making artistic decisions in the studio. And then we went to John Paul's and watched the whole Oscars. So then we've been hanging out for like 5 hours drinking. And our drummer's parents were there too. They'd come to visit, so who are literally boomers, I think. And then John Paul was like, okay, I know we all just watched a 5-hour broadcast, but do you guys want to watch The Doors by Oliver Stone now that it's 10:30 in the night? So that was the first time I'd seen it. And it was like really cathartic for me because the movie treats Jim Morrison's like Lizard King shamanistic artiste personality so sincerely that I couldn't help but find it parodic. And then that kind of skewered my own self-seriousness, which was really threatening to become a problem for me in that moment in time. So in a weird way, it kind of gave me the freedom to escape from my own inner Jim Morrison. But the boomerness of it all, I think that got kind of obscured by the fact that it's like when you watch Spinal Tap as a musician and you just have to take it seriously. And so you kind of miss some of the other points. It was a similar experience for me.
Yeah. I haven't seen the new Spinal Tap yet. Have you?
No, I haven't. I am extremely skeptical that it's possible to make a funny Spinal Tap movie in 2025.
Well, it's true because rock is kind of dissipated. I'm not going to say dead, but dissipated.
Yeah.
So to make a rock parody movie in 2025 is a little odd, I will say. But yeah, it's another boomer thing. These people are heroes of mine. I think I'm going to eventually see this movie. Upon this rewatch of The Doors, I was also really, really struck by that no one seemed to be concerned with Jim Morrison's well-being at any point in time. And but then again, no one seemed interested in anyone's their own well-being and anything, and his peccadillos and strangeness was just explained away by when he was a child, he saw a Native American out the car window, and that's why he's like this. The movie fails to really investigate his character, which is hilarious because it's $100 million movie about this character.
It's true. And it's the way that it spends the money on recreating these big concert set pieces, like you said, and the recording sessions and the, the wild parties and everything else. For all of that, it all seems very superficial. And I found, and everyone has a version of this, where if you watch $100 million Hollywood movie about your job, it's going to be a little more difficult for you to buy it. And I thought it was interesting. You were describing earlier that, the thousands of extras, the amazing concert set piece. Watching it, all I could think is that it looks small and fake and set bound. And, that's probably more on my having looked out at 1,000 crowds in my time. But
yeah.
It just like they spent all that money on that. And then meanwhile, Jim Morrison is just kind of like a freak in leather pants.
I did like Val Kilmer's performance. I think that he studied a lot. And he's got the stage moves down. He's got the drunken stumbling over on stage part down. So the movie does work on a movie level. It's just so silly. And I don't know. Are you a rock biopic person? Did you go see the Queen movie when it came out, for example?
No, I didn't. I find them all to sort of have the same effect on me as The Doors did the first time I watched it. I just can't take it seriously. And it never seems to engage with anything I'm interested in about the bands, although I think the fact of them is endlessly fascinating, and the way that they, especially the contemporary, like neutered hagiographical rock biopics, are such objects of fascination to me as products of our diseased culture, but I don't find them to be particularly exciting as movies. What about you?
I'll sometimes see them. I sort of enjoyed Bohemian Rhapsody. I really enjoyed Rocket Man, the Elton John one, because that is more explicitly a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But I have not seen Walk Hard, which everyone seems to love.
Oh, I just saw it for the first time, and it was hard to get out of my mind watching this movie. Obviously, everyone has heard the notion that since Walk Hard was made, it is difficult to sell a straightforward, sincere rock biopic. Or so people seem to always speculate online every time they make one, and then it goes on to make millions of dollars and win Oscars. So maybe it's actually... the genre was not as killed by Walk Hard as it seemed. And yet I do think that it's impossible for me to watch a 1991 Doors biopic through the same eyes as someone in 1991. I just have all of that accumulated meta awareness around the silliness of it and around the cliche of it all. And the Doors are 30 more years older as a band now than they were when that movie came out, 40 years. And that alone is a wild accumulation of cultural context between, a moment and another moment.
Yeah, at this point, it's like Jim Morrison is like Lincoln or any other like figure from American antiquity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who's to say what he was really like at this point? So I guess we could take the Doors at complete face value, and maybe he was a genius. Who knows?
Yeah, because maybe the whole base, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have Wikipedia. The baseline was different for genius. Yeah. It was another time.
Yeah. So are you like a fan of Oliver Stone in general? I guess I am. I guess I grew up watching his movies and liking them.
I frequently, across any director, across any genre, all movies, I have a shocking number of blind spots in movies I've missed. So I'll just preface any conversation about movies by saying I've seen like 3 Oliver Stone movies. That being said, JFK is one of my favorite movies. It's one of my most rewatched movies. I find everything that I find falls really flat for me about The Doors sings in JFK. The ridiculousness of it all, the absurdity, the wild self-seriousness of it all, the total like bullshit myth making where he plays so fast and loose with the facts. I remember seeing JFK in high school and saying like, oh, so they do know who did it. It's all right there. Donald Sutherland explained it, and finding out later that half of the things in the movie are just he made them up. But then the other half are totally true, and sometimes the true ones are weirder than the fake ones, but the whole thing is just this wild improvisational melange of fact and fiction, which, yeah, in JFK, to me, it's like the voice of God. It's truer than the truth. And then yet in The Doors, I find it to just be kind of phony baloney. What's your Oliver Stone high point?
I have not seen Platoon. Everyone seems to think that that's the best one, but
it's a fucking bummer.
I mean, I bet
my
it is.
Experience with it.
His run from being a successful screenwriter in the 70s all the way up to JFK is a pretty good run. And there's a lot of entertaining movies in there, like movies he wrote, such as Scarface or Midnight Express. I don't know. They're pretty fun. And then Salvador, Talk Radio, JFK, The Doors, they're all pretty fun. I have also not seen Born on the 4th of July. I just, war movies, I get it. I understand the horrors of war without needing a movie to like put it right in my face. So I haven't seen those, but I don't know. He got accolades. He was the king of the world at that moment. And it wasn't like he took a big swing with The Doors. He took a big swing every movie.
Yes.
For several movies in a row.
Yep.
So you have to appreciate that, as a lover of movies that take big swings. But I don't know, this movie, 3 stars on Letterboxd.
3 stars.
That's what I would give it, because it's too phony baloney, yet it's just eminently watchable, I think.
So let's talk a little more about the faster piece theater cut of The Doors, the new update for a new era. I guess in general, when you're going in to make these edits, do you have like a theory of the movie that you're trying to essentialize it to? Are you going with your gut, cutting out parts you find boring? Is it improvisational? Is it planned? How do you start one of these projects?
I guess we'll start with faster piece theater is my name for taking a movie and whittling it down to not its essentials, but just the things that I find intriguing or funny about it. And I usually have no plan. What I'll do is sometimes I'll glance at the movie first, watch maybe 2 minutes and go, okay, this is what the pace of the movie is. I think I can approximate the running time of the cut down before I actually start. And then I'll throw it in Adobe Premiere, hit spacebar, and start watching it for the first time while I'm about to cut it up. So it's very improvisational. And I take the Brian Eno, I Ching approach, and whatever will be, or whatever shall be, will be, or whatever nonsense philosophical phrase you want to attach it to. But it's just, is it funny? Is it boring? It's kind of a binary. So the second it gets boring, I make an edit point. The second it starts to get good again, I make another edit point and collapse it, and just keep doing that until I get the finished form. Sometimes that's 8 minutes. Sometimes it's an hour with The Doors, because I thought there's just so much spectacle here that I didn't want to make it 15 minutes. I wanted to make it a little meatier. However, there's still a ton of very redundant, boring, stupid parts of The Doors. So here you have this 2+ hours movie that's now 1 hour. And also, I'm not the only person to cut up The Doors, because Oliver Stone did a different cut of this movie a few years ago, which was basically taking out one scene towards the end, which does not make any difference because it's at the end of the movie. You're already 2 hours in. It's the scene where Val Kilmer is on the roof of like the Chateau Marmont and Meg Ryan is like, come back out here. What are you doing? Come back in. Like, they cut that one scene for reasons I don't even know. That's the final cut of The Doors, if you see that on Blu-ray or something.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Oliver Stone is a tinkerer. He's kind of like George Lucas. Famously, his movie Alexander, the like historical biopic about Alexander the Great, there are 4 different officially Blu-ray released versions of this movie because he could not stop fucking with it. And I don't know. I feel like if he's willing to fuck with his own movies, then I should be allowed license to fuck with his movies.
I absolutely agree. And I found, one of the things I found so interesting and enjoyable watching your cut and then watching the, I guess not the final cut, but the original release cut of The Doors.
Yeah.
It's much, much shorter. I found it to be, it like really tells the same story and conveys the same, because the movie is both really episodic and really feverish, and there's sort of these recurring visions that happen, and it borders on, the magical realism isn't the right word, but whatever, the phantasmagorical is leaking in around the edges, as is appropriate for a biography of the Lizard King himself. And I really found that your cut really almost added to that effect, and the sort of wild montage of it all, as the choice that he made to depict this band's this guy's roller coaster stumbling down a hill experience of his life and his art. Yeah, it was kind of like, I don't need the other 2 hours of this movie to get the whole gist of it, I think. I mean, maybe that's a dumb guy thing to say, but I found it to be, it really did essentialize what I think is interesting about the movie in the first place.
Yeah. Well, when I do one of these edits, I'm not looking to keep any narrative cohesion. So I will make a wild leap from one scene to maybe 7 minutes later, omitting stuff. And you don't know what this stuff I omitted is because you're just watching the edit. But it kind of doesn't matter because, again, it's all about what I find funny or interesting. And I will say that I left in a lot more of the movie than I usually do when I make one of these things, which is a testament to the filmmaking and the style and the epicness of this thing. But also, you don't need the scenes with him arguing with Meg Ryan in domestic conflict because they're both dumbbells. We get that from the beginning. And they're alcohol soaked and taking too many drugs, and you get that. So I just wanted to focus on the moments that I don't know, might resonate with an audience that's already drunk or stoned or on the level with all of the characters.
Well, and the narrative beats of the rock biopic and like the rock and roll narrative in general are so culturally ingrained by this point that cutting over 8 minutes in the movie just still implies the same narrative progression, because it's clear when it's like when the guy says, "Oh, we should go into the studio," and then you hear the song playing that now the newspapers are spinning saying The Doors #1 in whatever countries across the world. And it's cool to be able to lean into those narrative beats. I don't know. It's obviously not your primary focus, but it does provide you with a nice little scaffolding that's just sort of there in everyone's brain.
I also think that maybe people should watch The Doors because it gives you an insight into what the record business used to be, which is so nostalgic, right? Yep. It depicts an era where bands routinely would put out 2 albums a year, every year, and tour. I don't know how they did that. I guess they had fewer distractions. They didn't have any Nintendo back then. So, yeah. But like that's fascinating to see. And when you're making records that fast, you don't have a lot of time for introspection. So you just kind of commit to tape whatever you're working on. And it just so happened to be that they were working in a really fertile period. They're all in their early 20s when they're doing this shit. And no one's telling them no. I think it's a big factor because this is an era in which the record companies, much like the movie studios around the time of Easy Rider, they did not know how to speak to the counterculture or the current youth culture. So they're just like, you know what, do whatever and we'll just market whatever you got. And sometimes the Doors music reflects that.
Yeah.
So you and I grew up in the 90s and aughts, and that's a much different time for the record business. How does your experience mirror or not mirror what the Doors go through in this movie? Like they're playing a show at the Whiskey, and then the guy from Elektra's like, hey, I'm the guy from Elektra. Does that mirror what happened to you at all?
Well, I find it so fascinating to even reflect on because before I got into the business, my expectations were completely created by media like the Doors. And so there are things that I feel like I experienced in a similar way that I'm not even sure actually unfolded that way. They just sort of fit into the narrative beats that I was expecting when I was 21. And so I took them at that, at that level. There was certainly less money flying around in my orbit. There was less, I don't want to say there was less like libertine freedom. There was less indulgence and more emphasis. It was much more of a business. There was much more emphasis on efficiency and on customer service. We didn't talk about it in such blood-soaked terms, but in retrospect, the way that we would talk about our creative decisions very quickly once we got into the music business just became what will be popular. And that's not new, obviously. The music business was born out of selling records to people. But the rock and roll dream of just making your artistic statement and being the conduit for connection and the suits just being the people who give you the money to facilitate that was already far in the rear view. And people were sort of pretending like, oh, maybe the Strokes and the Vines and, this new era of guitar toting leather jacket wearers are bringing that attitude back. But I don't think that could come back, and it certainly never did. And so that was sort of the commercialness of it all was much more close at hand. But also it was like less harrowing and feverish. I never witnessed anyone get locked in an on fire closet even one time, and I don't really regret that per se. What about you? You played, I'm sure you still play music, and you've been a longtime bassist primarily, right?
Yeah, I only know how to play bass guitar. My hands are too clumsy for guitar, and my body is uncoordinated for drums. So bass is what I gravitated to.
A born bassist.
Yeah, and I don't play music so much anymore, primarily because my band is Museum of Home Video. My band is this other media. I am in a band sort of, but it's in another medium.
Yeah,
and especially during the lockdown era, I didn't take the bass out of the case once. I was so engrossed in growing my live stream channel that I didn't think to noodle around, not even once, because the lure of Adobe Premiere was so strong. And I've always been a found footage enthusiast, and I've been a big fan of other people who do it, and I treat them like bands. Groups like Everything Is Terrible, Found Footage Festival, TV Carnage, and then, people like the Bob Dylan of found footage, who is Bruce Conner, and other people like Craig Baldwin. I don't know. I love these things. I love music and film equally. So I apply a musicality to things like this edit of The Doors.
So as a musician, and especially as a younger musician, what was your relationship like with the music of The Doors?
I grew up liking it in junior high and high school. So I had a record player in my room since I was a little child, and I don't know if that was unusual. I'm born in 79, so throughout the 80s, I would constantly spin all the Disney LPs that my parents bought for me when we were at Disneyland. And when I was in 5th or 6th grade, I discovered, oh my God, my mother has a hidden record collection in a closet. So there was one stack of LPs that was in a closet with boxes kind of positioned around it as if to say, don't notice that this is here. I don't know if that's what my mother actually was thinking, but it was a pile behind a pile behind a pile. And The Doors self-titled was one of the records that my mother was listening to in high school. So I'm like, I guess I'm going to try this out. And it kind of blew my mind. It was one of the first records that actually unlocked a door to, ironically,
a door of perception
to a whole new realm of stuff. Now, whether that realm of stuff was just 60s rock, whatever. But she had a whole lot of things like Kenny Loggins and who's the poet? Rod McEwen. She had a lot of Rod McEwen records. But it was The Doors self-titled, which I played 1,000 times in junior high, that I just really got into. And in fact, when I got my first CD player, The Doors self-titled and The Doors movie OST, those were two of the first CDs I ever bought. And then as high school went on, I graduated from that to punk and metal and prog rock and sort of left the Doors behind to a certain degree. But I do love the music. It's groovy. It's fun. It's original. I mean, 60 years later, it does still have a snap to it. So that's something. But again, undiagnosed, maybe if he had been on Quaaludes instead of booze, like his life would have been a little different. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's good that he checked out before cocaine was a thing.
We'll never know. And that's the promise of Oliver Stone in its way too. He followed that killer down the hall. Yeah, I learned about the Doors because my school bus driver somehow got wind that I was like into music, and she showed up one day and she was like, you should read this book. And it was like a paperback biography of Jim Morrison. I don't remember what it was called, and I have no idea if it was a legitimate scholarly one or like a trashy cash-in one or what. But I read it and I found the story because I was young enough that it was sort of one of my first exposures to that style of rock narrative, the self-destructive genius narrative. And I found it really compelling, and I sought out a little bit of Doors music, and it just bounced off me. I just was like, this is too silly. I couldn't even then take it seriously. And the lyrics, there was so much emphasis on his poetry and his way with words. And I found the lyrics to be, kind of, after all the buildup, I was like, this is what everyone was talking about. I don't know, guys. And
well, he was stoned and drunk. So
yeah. And I was 12 and a nerd. So it was maybe not the right meeting of maybe my brain wasn't ready for it, but I could never recover from that. But it did strike me watching the movie how the music is a little, left of center. It's a little jazzy and it's a little groovy, and it goes to some places that must have been really fresh and exciting to hear musically at the time, even though the emphasis is always on the front man, as it so often is.
Yeah. Also, Kurt Weill is an influence, which I'm sure was unfamiliar to a lot of boomer children when they were growing up. And it is jazzy and it is funky and taking a lot of influences, both literary and musically, and fusing them together. And they had hit after hit after hit. I mean,
huge band.
Yeah, something undeniable. But when presented in the 35 millimeter anamorphic scope epic film format, maybe the music's not that epic. Like maybe it doesn't deserve that style treatment. Maybe this movie would have been better as a mumblecore indie rather than some like $100 million thing.
Yeah, a lot of shots of Kevin Dillon like playing the drums and looking mad at Jim Morrison. That's my main takeaway from the music of the movie, is him just going while Val Kilmer stumbles around being a superstar.
What did you think about all the actors playing? It seems like they mostly got it down as opposed to other films where it's like clearly the person has never held a guitar before. But what's your expert take on, like, were they actually nailing the physicality of being a band? And are there movies where you think the filmmakers do get it right, where the band feels like a band?
I thought that they did a great job. Both, I thought the actors did well, and also the filmmaking didn't emphasize it. There's another version of the movie where there's a lot of close-up shots of the hand on the organ flying around playing the iconic shit, but mostly that's framed out and you see Kyle MacLachlan, smoking a cigarette and looking cool. And I think that's generally the right choice. And I thought the guys did a good job embodying it. I thought it was a very interesting group of actors. Kyle MacLachlan, always a welcome presence. Kevin Dillon, always Johnny Drama. And then the guy from JFK, who's the fake Oswald, who says, "Sorry, I thought I was shooting at that son of a bitch Kennedy," is also there, which I was really happy to see him.
Is that Frank Whaley from...
Yeah.
Yeah, he plays Robbie Krieger, right?
Yep. You know, I think it's kind of cool to have a group of guys that aren't A-listers like Val Kilmer rounding it out, but are all great actors and interesting, you know, strong presences in their own ways, which as the characters are kind of being overshadowed by Jim Morrison, the actors are sort of existing there, you know, behind Val Kilmer, who's going so hard, and the rest of them are keeping it pretty chill. Like the rhythm, or not the rhythm, I'm trying to not use music words for film. It's the chemistry between the four guys felt reasonably lived in and band-like. It's really hard to depict the genesis of a song on screen. And so all these movies always resort to the same egregious scene that this movie typifies, where, you know, one guy says, "Hey, I got something new," and then he sort of strums a tentative, shitty version of Light My Fire. And then all of a sudden the band launches into the master recording of Light My Fire. And then one of the guys says, wait a minute. It just needs one more iconic thing that everyone recognizes. I have an idea. And then they do that thing. I understand why it's depicted that way always. It's usually a pretty good scene, but also it's really hard for me to fully emotionally invest in, you know?
Sometimes songs do come together in an instant, and sometimes they take 5 years.
Yep.
And movies are definitely not good at conveying either. The movie that I think most nails being the reality of being in a band day to day is Frank from 2014. I don't know if you saw that one.
Oh, is that the one where Michael Fassbender's wearing a big head?
Yes.
I tried to watch. I remember when it came out, I tried to watch it, and whatever streaming service it was on, it crashed, and I couldn't watch it, and then I never watched it again. So no, I missed my chance.
The depictions of the interplay between the musicians to me felt the most like an actual touring DIY band.
Right.
And the way that when they're playing the song on a stage, they are physically moving and eye contact and getting into the music and then going back to the eye contact. I don't know. There was something about it. But often movies do not get it right at all. And
no.
It's a really interesting why more musicians don't turn to filmmaking to make music movies.
Yeah, I thought it's a totally different thing, and it's not depicting the same mechanical processes, but I rewatched 8 Mile recently, and that's another movie that felt like it just felt really real in terms of starting to create something, starting to embody, you know, for me, it was starting to be part of a band, which is like a thing you learn how to do together and as a group, or sorry, together and separately. And he was sort of, you know, he's doing that as one guy, but that one really rang true to me as like, and the way it fits into your life and kind of defines your life, but also you still have to go to work around it. And, you know, probably because life was a little different in California in the 70s than in Michigan in the 90s. You don't see these guys going to their jobs, you know. I guess you see Jim Morrison quit film school. Do you know if the student film that's depicted in this movie had any resemblance to something the real Jim Morrison made?
I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't know, but I do know that there are bootlegs that circulate of a movie that Jim Morrison did make called Highway, spelled HWY. And I don't know if that was from his student time or during like a fuck around period in between making records or something.
Yeah.
It is also sad to think that maybe Jim Morrison could have been a filmmaker of note.
Yeah.
But who knows, you know?
Well, that's it. I mean, it's like it's great man theory of history. And, you know, when it comes to rock biopics, you do tend to go in that direction. But he, you know, he does seem like he just was a exceptionally charismatic, present individual who was bound to bend the fabric of his reality in one way or another.
Yeah.
And that seems to be who Oliver Stone wants to make movies about, and maybe who he perceives himself as being.
That's a great segue, because does he see himself as the filmic Jim Morrison? Is he the Jim Morrison of Hollywood?
I was reading online about this movie, and I can't remember who it was, but someone who was close to the Doors, I don't know if it was one of the band members or one of their family members, said, "That's not Jim Morrison in that movie. That's Oliver Stone, played by Val Kilmer." So someone thought so.
Gotta love Oliver's Hitchcock-like cameo as the film school teacher who's like, get out of here.
Running a very chill class, I must say.
On a base level, I appreciate this movie because it's like, it depicts a time that's pre-cell phone.
Living in the moment.
Yes, the movie is the ultimate living in the moment movie for sure. And maybe that's why we tend to think of boomers as the self-centered generation, because they were just living in the moment constantly, regardless of the consequences. So is this a eulogy for boomerism while boomers were still in control? I don't know. These are the things I think about when I'm stoned at 11 a.m. talking about an Oliver Stone movie.
Well, by the time you've made your edit, how many times do you feel like you've watched the Doors movie through? Is it really just a matter of you shoot through it once and then you double check to make sure you didn't miss any cuts? Or does this take days of sort of watching and carving and watching?
The vast majority of them are first drafts. They are, I got to get this done because I have a show every week to do. And I trust my instincts enough to not needle with things once I've locked the vibe of what it's going to be. But you're right. I do it once. It's kind of like automatic writing almost. And then I do go back and make sure the audio transitions work and there's no pops in between like at a point. And I look to see, can I take a few more minutes out? Is this thing actually extraneous when I thought it was necessary to make people laugh and keep people entertained? Because the pace of my show overall is very fast. If you were to put a BPM on it, I would say like 150. It's like you're locked in. I make it so that people are afraid to go to the bathroom because they'll miss something. So again, this was an interesting edit because I gave it more languid screen time than I would normally. But also because I thought, since we're going to be talking about it and you're going to be using it for your show, I might as well make it a little bit more substantial than my typical slash and burn 12-minute prankster version. I mean, I do feel like a prankster regardless of the length, but at least this is like me not mocking Oliver Stone's too much.
Yeah, and I mean, the Doors music just kind of begs to be languid. You know, their BPMs are, I think, seldom getting up to 150, and it would have been hard probably to chop too fast, or you're going to get all these scenes, and they use so much of the music. Obviously, you're going to get scenes where you just kind of hear like and then they're on to the next one, and it would get too choppy. Like I said, I really think it tells the whole story. It really communicates the essence of the movie so effectively, and I just think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask what your first such edit was, and how you first sort of hatched the idea, and how you first approached the first premiere session that you went into.
Okay, I guess I should tell my whole background of,
or just tell your whole story from wherever it begins.
Born and raised in LA, grew up in movie culture, loved movies to death from infancy. Got my first video store job right out of high school. And then eventually a few years later, I became one of the managers at Cinephile Video, which is miraculously still there in West LA. It's an enormous store. It's kind of like in Toronto, they used to have Suspect Video. It's kind of like that. And video editing technology in the late 90s was just starting to become something that the average person could tackle based upon the hardware that was affordable. In previous eras, video editing software was like tens of thousands of dollars. You needed your own dedicated like room to operate it.
Yeah.
And now it's on a desktop in your living room. So I was surrounded by 40,000 titles in this specialty video store. And in the late 90s, I made my first found footage edit, which I just called Logo, which was me compiling all the VHS fly-by-night company opening logos that everyone loves. The Vestron one is the most well-loved. But I took 150 of those and I just kind of laid them end to end in a rhythm that I thought was kind of funny. And I was off to the races. And then just kind of professionally dealing with archivism as I do in my day jobs. I don't know. I love Negativland. I love Craig Baldwin. I love seeing stuff on MTV that was recycled media spat out to a 90s culture. It was all just sitting in my head. And so when I got to Cinefamily, which is a now defunct movie theater here in Los Angeles. It's a single screen repertory art house, or was. And we just made our own trailers. So I just kept swimming in the pool of found footage and recontextualizing media. We would make our own full 90-minute live shows out of found footage just because no one was telling us no. And then in more recent times, I've started a live stream channel called Museum of Home Video, which is the flagship show is me every Tuesday night doing a few hours of presenting edits like this, just showing stuff in its entirety that I think is fun. Old game shows, talk shows, commercials. I'll take a movie and I'll cut it down to 12 minutes in some irreverent fashion. And it's all presented kind of like I'm an MTV VJ. And I come on air every 30 minutes and go, you just saw that. Now you're going to see this. Because I also have a background of being a college radio DJ here in Los Angeles on KXLU. So I just took all of these things, hosting movie shows, creating found footage edits, you needing to present like a DJ or something. It kind of squashed it all together, and that became Museum of Home Video. So I'm kind of swimming in found footage nonstop, and it's my medium at this point.
What first attracted you to this like cultural detritus? You know, do you remember what first crossed your field of vision that compelled you and hooked you into this world? Because it's not something that everyone naturally ever even comes across.
Correct. I was babysat by television because I had a single mom who was doing her best.
Yeah. And
she happened to plop me down in front of cable television. I was lucky enough to have cable TV in the home. And I don't know, just doing the 500 channels thing. And also at the peak of MTV, the peak of Comedy Central, seeing Joe Bob Briggs on the movie channel on cable. It's all just swimming in my head. MST3K, Kids in the Hall. You know, it's just, I just lived that world for so long aesthetically. Oh, being into LP collecting right out of high school in the late 90s at a moment when no one gave a shit about vinyl. So I could grow a 2,000 record collection in college. I don't know. I was just constantly thinking about archival stuff, vintage stuff. Just kind of happened.
It's my temptation always to take a real philosophical, what does this tell us about us angle on these things. Do you have such a philosophical eye on it? Or are you, again, just hitting it more, like you said, going through the edit, just like what makes me laugh, what bores me, keep jettison, you know?
Well, most of it is interesting to me because it tells me where we've been and it points to how we got here. And it kind of also points to where we're going if it's prophetic enough. So I just think that we can explain our current society and its quirks. The signposts were already there. Mm-hmm. And none more apparent than in the commercials, I think.
Yep.
I had a very, very wise art history teacher in my senior year of high school. And we not only read a very fantastic book called The Shock of the New, which is written by an Australian art critic named Robert Hughes, who actually hosted a TV version of it where he, in his Australian blah, 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 he just kind of narrates this whole 10-part amazing series about art. Everyone should go check that out. But he also one day came into the class. This is still in the VHS era. This is later 90s. He puts a tape he doesn't even say hi to the class. He puts a tape in the TV and he says to the class, okay, today we're going to watch commercials with the sound off because that will tell you what they're actually selling to you. That'll give you a hint as to the subliminal things they're trying to communicate. And it's that, I don't know, that was 30 years ago. I still think about that because it was so instructive to understand media literacy and how reading archival material can explain where we're at. So that's what continually fascinates me. And as a kid, I wanted to watch all of TV and try to get through a lot of it. So now I do kind of get to watch all of TV and movies and share what I've learned with the audience, meaning I cut it up for funny purposes.
I mean, the commercials thing is the perfect way to talk about it. The commercials thing is really interesting in Canada because typically the way it works here is all the channels, even the American channels that carry American shit, they replace the commercials with Canadian commercials. And so it's quite rare, but every once in a while it just seems to randomly happen. You'll be watching a football game or an episode of TV or whatever, and you'll realize, oh shit, we're getting American commercials. These are different. And increasingly, the way that I think I notice that is less that I see that the products are American and more that I feel like a horror starting to grow in my body because all the commercials suddenly are for like a flashlight that can also be used as a blunt weapon in case of home invasion by a MS-13 gang member. And it's the juxtaposition between them, sometimes in the same commercial break, is just like really jarring and rattling. But also, as you say, we both grew up on TV. Watching TV was like for me, it was a fun treat. I had the opposite thing where my parents, their way of trying hard was to stop me from watching television. They subscribed to that notion. But the upshot kind of becomes the same thing. Either you're exposed to it so much you have to watch it all the time, or it's kept away from you so you have to watch it all the time. And the commercials are part of the TV. You couldn't look at your phone, you couldn't get your computer out, you watched the commercials too. And so our whole media brains were in some ways created as much by the commercials we were watching as by the quote unquote art or at least entertainment we were watching. And that seems to me something that's really spoken to by what you're doing, where you're sort of mashing these things together in some ways. And you know, Oliver Stone's The Doors is broken down into parts alongside these, you know, old commercials, and they're using the same language to speak to us. They're using the same visual cues and narrative understandings and assumptions. And like they're speaking to us across the same cultural fabric, and forcing the mind to confront that, I think, is really a worthwhile endeavor, not to preach.
The commercials that I tend to pick to show, because I don't just grab any commercials. I will sift through all the commercials to get just like I'm sifting through the movie. And, the ones that I tend to choose are usually the most cinematic, where some kind of cinematic technique, whether it's editing or cinematography or just a fucked up jingle that kind of takes you out of the reality of it and kind of makes you think, what is going on here? Why did they make it like this? Why does this exist? I love that question.
Yes.
Why does this exist?
Yeah.
In movies, it's kind of like it used to be so bad it's good. That was a very Gen X thing. In the aughts and teens, that in movie terms moved to what the fuck? What the fuck? You know, movies like Birdemic or Miami Connection, those were foregrounded as cult movies because of what the fuck.
Yep.
We have evolved beyond so bad it's good. Now it's evolved beyond that. And I think the true question to ask is not what the fuck, but why does this exist?
Yeah.
And that curiosity breeds empathy, which I think is also a hallmark of Museum of Home Video, where, yes, we're poking fun mercilessly at some stuff, but we're also trying to make you understand context and, again, how that informs where we're at and where we're going. So that's the philosophy of it.
On that note, before we started recording, John Paul and I were talking about we're also in a book club together because we don't talk enough just doing the podcast. And it's a sci-fi book club, and everyone in the book club is buzzing about this new Ice Cube War of the Worlds movie. I haven't seen it yet, but apparently it's a disaster. But though even the way people are talking about it is like they must have known, it must be on purpose. And it does seem like there is this new phenomenon of self-aware would be so bad it's good, what the fuck cult movies, but they are doing it in a knowing way. They all went to screenings of The Room and then wanted to make their own The Room. And then the question is it possible to make The Room on purpose, or does that... Anyway, what do you make of where we're at in that cycle of things?
I have seen the Ice Cube War of the Worlds, and it is singular. I think that's why it's becoming viral. It's not just a so bad it's good. It has a huge movie star in it, for one. Yeah. And it was a COVID lockdown production, too. Yeah. So it's kind of like how The Deer Hunter came out in 1978, and it was about Vietnam, which it had ended about 5 years earlier. So I think that's where we're at with COVID movies right now. And War of the Worlds is not only tremendously just stupid, but it allows us to laugh at us at that time. Perhaps it's a little bit of an escape valve for the COVID tensions because none of us have really dealt with it. There's something about because it's also a Screen Life movie. where the entirety of the film takes place on the screen of a computer. And there's more of those. Unfriended was one recently. It was kind of a minor hit. So there's a lot of ingredients in the soup as to why it's so fucking tasty as like a So Bad It's Good movie. But then also you cannot force a new version of The Room into being. It has to happen organically. And we can't forget that everyone's brain is broken. Like the last 10 years have, whether it's the politics or it's the advances in technology or what the technology does to us, all of us are just fucked. And so sometimes bad ideas from fucked imaginations just leak through and become these ultimate talked about viral cult movies.
That's very well put. And I think I sometimes catch myself in my mind, and this is such a bad impulse, tending to want to like gatekeep that kind of, I'm not sure if ironic low culture is quite the way to put it, which is such an ironic thing to feel like, oh, you don't even understand what a true bad movie is. And I like your more egalitarian take on it.
Well, I grew up in that culture. I mean, Gen X, I think our biggest failing is the gatekeepery thing. Just culturally, I think it reads poorly today and is unempathetic and very, very straight white guy, I might say.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that vibe has dissipated. And also a lot of stuff, especially in the Cine family time, we were doing cutting edge repertory film shows in 2008 to 2015, 16, somewhere in there. That's what the length of the place. And we did some edgelord things. I'm not proud of 100% of the material we put up. I think I evolved my style and we did do a lot of good things, but I think now I have a different approach where I'm thinking about the audience more these days. Back then it was like, haha, look at this funny video joke I made.
Yeah.
Now I think it's more about what am I giving the audience? What kind of a good time or a bummer am I giving them? So I'm just thinking about things a little differently.
What excites you about current happenings in movies, television, popular culture writ large? I sense that you have a more optimistic outlook than I do, and I would love to hear anything you might want to share about it.
My day job is in the film exhibition and distribution, primarily of repertory movies, of old movies like The Doors, right? So I've seen an enormous explosion upward in the number of film restorations being put out into the world, the number of places, especially here in Los Angeles, showing movies. In Toronto, you have the Paradise on Bloor.
Yeah.
And you have the Review.
The Review is just like a 5-minute walk from where I'm sitting right now. I go there all the time and I wish I went there more often.
They have sold out crowds often because there's like a lot of movies to show, a lot of places to show them at. The gamification and the FOMO effects of Letterboxd on movie watching, which cannot be understated. And not just Gen Z, but people in general who previously did not go to the movies, old movies. They're understanding that it's a choice that they can make when they go out. Like going to see an old movie is now in the conversation with a bar, a restaurant, live music, a live DJ, the park, the museum. And it's just part of the deck of cards of choices. And a lot of people just want to feel good. And so it's good to see a movie with a crowd, and especially a movie that's old you never heard of. And there's a rise of that. And there's a diminishing of first run because especially last year, Hollywood released fewer movies physically because of the strikes. And that had an effective, all the movie theaters need movies to show to stay open. So repertory became more of a thing more recently. And that is getting me really optimistic. It's growing my business. So I find that I have real world data on this is happening. And I think it'll just spill over into other mediums eventually. I've seen a lot more bookstores open, which makes me happy.
That is great. And it's interesting too, the way that the older media is kind of getting more on an even playing field with the newer media now. It's with the music industry now. It used to be if a song was going to change your life, if a song was going to blow up and change your life, it would happen when the song was new. And if it didn't happen, even in my career, we had plenty of songs that had all these hopes and dreams on them and then got stuck in the vault after it didn't hit the first year. And now the band's over, and yet at any second on TikTok, any one of our songs or any song that anyone has ever recorded in the history of recorded music could become the biggest song on TikTok. And like something from 20 years ago, it can just right back up to the surface. And that seems like a really big change in the way popular culture is consumed.
Yes, I have heard about this. I'm not on TikTok. It's funny. You'd think I would be, but I don't have any time for that because I have to make a show every week. And I have a day job on top of that. So a friend of mine who is in a current touring band who opens for like big acts and stuff, he's told me, he blew my fucking mind because he told me that part of being in the music business right now, if you're a legacy act or a new act, is you have to be ready at any time to win the fame lottery of TikTok, because a band from the 90s, who did he describe? Guster. He said
Guster, we've had them on the show.
Yes. He said that like Guster suddenly like plays stadiums now because of a TikTok fame lottery that they won. Is that true?
Something like that, yeah. And it might have even been, they're really good on TikTok. We have a major label debut TikTok. I only go into it to add captions to our videos because they have got a good captioning algorithm in there. And we follow Guster, so whenever I open the app, I see their latest video. And the numbers are always great, and the content is always premium. And I just love to see it for them. And it's a perfect example. There's a Canadian band who, one of their like 15-year-old songs blew up on TikTok. And Canadian bands historically always struggle being nearly as big in America as they are in Canada. And this was a band that, could tour really big in Canada, but had never done huge shit in the States. And then their next American tour was suddenly the biggest tour they'd ever done, just on the strength of, this old song of theirs that for whatever reason clicked for in 15-second intervals.
Mm-hmm. I have been reading this book that reads like a Stephen King horror novel called Mood Machine by Liz Pelly. I don't know if you've read this already.
Not yet, but it's on the list. John Paul Bullock is a strong advocate for that book as well.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Not good
news.
It
really is like Clive Barker time in the music industry, where like the corporate Cenobites are out and it's a weird, fucked up time. And Spotify has been using ghost artists for a decade. It's not just the Velvet Sundown. They've been doing it the whole time.
Yeah.
Practically.
It's just shattering it seems like we're just in the industry and the tradition are holding on. Like the thing that is embodied in the Doors movie, the dream of the big rock and roll music industry when it was four guys could get together and do acid and write a song that changes the world and changes their lives and everyone makes bazillions of dollars off it. All that shit, the bottom fell out 20 years ago, if not longer. And they're just clinging to it, but you know that it's sooner or later, it's all going to be gone. It's just literally not sustainable. A real classic, the old world is dying and the new world is struggling to be born moment. And I'm really curious to see where, the music industry, which I know so intimately in particular, winds up, but really all of it. I mean, I guess this is just another way of saying I'm curious to see what's ahead for all of us.
Yeah, my own bands that I was in the underground scene in LA in the aughts, we were never big enough that where we would have been courted by a major label, although one of my bandmates sure thought we were going to be, and that was a fun tension within a stupid electro-punk DIY band. But I definitely know what it's like to go on tour and to do the daily grind of being a musician on tour. And I think about it all the time, and this movie doesn't do enough to really capture the tour part. It shows them playing like the iconic shows in certain cities, but the absolute grind of being a musician where you do have to put out 2 albums a year and tour and do promo and basically live a 365-day a year life as a machine, because it was a machine.
Yeah. And it is interesting. I mean, obviously there's handlers and people that help you with it, but the movie highlights, Jim Morrison's spiraling out and running around, stumbling crazy, having epiphanies. But you do have to show up at the studio to make 2 records a year. And you do have to wake up in the morning to catch the flight to the next city to do the tour. And there is just a certain amount of professionalism baked into even the rock star lifestyle of Jim Morrison that's not sexy, and I get why it's not in the movie, but is, probably as much the reality of his life experience as the drug-fueled epiphanies in the desert, which I know that scene is fictional, but it's metaphorical too.
Maybe he was an alcoholic because that was the only way he could cope with having to put out 2 records a year and touring and pro.
Yep. Well, the thing about touring that lends itself so well to alcoholism, as you know, is that it's a lot of waiting around. You get to the venue at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then, you know, you have your sound check, and then you've got like 6 hours before you play the show, and you can't really do that much because you have a show to play that night and you're sort of at work, but no one's stopping you from drinking 6 beers during that time period. And it's so fun to do that sometimes you just do it. And then sometimes you do too much of it and don't stop when you should. That's why you got to stick to cans of Coors Light and not bottles of Jack Daniels, was always my philosophy.
My technique at a certain point was to get a full cup of soda water and just put a single whiskey shot in it, so that I could have something to sip on that was mildly alcoholic the whole time and not have to. That was my coping mechanism of being on the road. I think about it all the time, but it was also very destructive, you know, physically on you.
I would love to see more Doors touring depicted, simply because I'm curious about the mechanical realities of touring at that point. Like, what did they have, a tour bus? It's the same thing with the Beatles. I'm reading the Beatles anthology book again, and I'm the most fascinated by the parts where they describe driving on the motorways in their van, trying to imagine what was van touring in 1962 Britain like, having van toured in 2012 Britain.
Yeah. In Britain, it seems more miserable because of the cold and the damp. I mean, a movie, am I right that they cover this in Control, like the horrible conditions of cramming all of them into one car?
I haven't seen that movie, but I hope that they do. And if they do, it makes me much more inclined to go check it out.
Yeah, I've read a lot of, but for some reason, I decided to read as many books about Joy Division and New Order as I could, because I read Peter Hook's book about the Hacienda, and that was so fascinating. I'm like, they must all have books, and so they did. So I read the Bernard Sumner book, the other Peter Hook books, and then like contemporary 80s books about the bands as they were happening. And yeah, it sounded miserable. Like touring in Britain was miserable, but at least everything was like 45 minutes away from each other.
Yes. I mean, as a Canadian, you know, there's like generously 10 major markets in this country that you can tour, and doing those 10 markets is a very long, drawn out process with a lot of driving in it. Or you can go to England for 2 weeks and play like 30 towns and still have 40 left over that you haven't hit yet, even though they're all next to each other. It's just such a different experience.
Yeah. Can I tell you you usually ask people what they eat when they're recording.
If you have an answer prepared, you know, much like on a cooking show where they bring a finished one out from under the desk.
I had merely, because we were talking about England, the one time that my band did get to play in Europe, and we went to the UK, we played in Southampton, which is outside of London. And the 2 others and our friend who we brought along as the driver, they were all vegetarians. So they tended to dictate where we'd go find food, which is fine with me. And we ended up at an Indian restaurant, which had no vegetarian options, which was bizarre. I'd never encountered that. I guess it's just the neighborhood. But they ordered all these dishes, and they asked if they could just substitute potatoes for the meat, because we were told that the restaurant only had potatoes. So we over ordered, and there's 6 different dishes on the table, and they're all potatoes. And as we were sitting there eating them, I noticed to the corner of my eye, like it's a Pink Panther movie, like it's a Blake Edwards gag. There's a delivery person who's just showed up with an enormous, like 50-pound sack of potatoes.
That's touring. That's what it's like. Just a 50-pound sack of potatoes to replace the 50 pounds of potatoes you are currently eating. Like, oh yeah, tomorrow there's just more of the same coming for me. What was the name of your band? I don't think we've mentioned it yet. I want to give the people a chance to seek it out.
Oh God, I don't want to give any of my ex-bandmate the Spotify pennies, but it's called Anavan.
Okay.
And we were around for about 5 years in the second half of the aughts. During the MySpace era. It was a good time to be a band.
Yes, it was. One of the last.
Yeah. And our first record was on an indie label called GSL, which I was a huge fan of growing up and going to DIY shows. And so I was a fan of the label so much. When I got into being in a band, I thought, can we get our band on this label? And it happened. It was fun.
Amazing.
We had 2 albums. I played bass. They're on streaming. I have no idea who gets those royalties.
It's never amounts to enough to really notice. That's the problem with those. Yeah, sad state of affairs.
Are you thinking about pulling your shit from Spotify?
I don't know. Like, I think that the people who are doing it are correct. Spotify's just, I use it. I pay for it. It pays me to a much smaller degree. The first year that Spotify came out, they gave, like, if you were in a band, they gave you a free premium account to Spotify as like a hello. Because, you know, just like the major labels and all these other companies, the front men are like real cool, enthusiastic, sincere, well-meaning music lovers who get hired to, you know, to go out there and be the ambassadors. And then when it turns out that what's behind it all is the T1000 face of capitalism, everyone already signed up for it. And now it's like, well, I don't know how else to listen to music anymore. I can't afford, largely because of Spotify, I can't afford to be going and buying CDs or records like I used to.
Used CDs at a good record store, they're a fucking dollar. So late 90s, when I started collecting LPs at age 18, all the vinyl was super cheap. And the CDs were like if you bought a new CD, it was the equivalent of 30 American dollars today, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And we all did it all the time.
All the time.
Now, almost 30 years later, the dynamic has flipped a 180 and now CDs are $1 and the vinyl's expensive. But it's not that CDs are back. It's that CDs are everywhere and they're cheap. So have at it. A lot of people still have the shit in the car. And I just bought a 5 CD changer that came with its own preamp speakers. I'm having a great time.
Although I can't say that I'm living the CD lifestyle fully yet. I really co-sign anyway. And well, also just as a musician, when people were buying CDs, musicians were buying houses. And now nobody's buying shit. And I get my $1 Spotify royalty check. Jim Morrison would have hated to see it.
Yeah. But if he didn't die in 71, there's a good chance he would have died in 73 or 5 or something.
It's a great point. It was not a healthy lifestyle. One cannot live on one's own blood alone.
Yeah. One of the most terrifying revelations in that Mood Machine book about Spotify is that it treats the artists like customers, where there's a portal and you can look at your data and you are becoming a customer of theirs.
I remember when they introduced the portal, looking at it, and for a second, I remember being really dazzled and thinking, wow, this is really such radical transparency to be able to see exactly where people are listening and to what songs. And then I went in to look at it to make, you know, smart new plans for our business from it. And what you learn is people are listening to your music in all the major big cities where people have always listened to music and where you are already touring, because obviously you're going to go to LA and New York and London and Toronto and Chicago. Like, oh, maybe this wasn't worth giving up the entire economic stability of our way of life for this fake information.
Yeah. It really is the mask off thing, isn't it? Where the CEO is framed as like a good guy or your pal or whatever. And then they invest in AI military drone, nuke weapon shit, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we're in the mask off stage of our civilizational progress or lack thereof. And it is, well, as you say, it is at least a very interesting time to experience media. I love to watch NFL football. Speaking of institutions that are not morally pure at their heart, but just like, it's such a full-on 10, like everything to 10 entertainment product. Just everything about it is this like perfect machine of human entertainment. It seems like you're really looking right into the core of the thing every time you watch it. And maybe that's just a highfalutin way for me to justify watching the Packers play every week. But I do find it to be a genuinely like psychically moving experience every time I watch a football game.
So, one thing that Museum of Home Video and the NFL have in common is that it's all appointment viewing. Sports is the last frontier of people having to show up at a certain time and date to watch a thing.
Yep.
And that has gone away for everything else. So I think that the majority of my live stream audience likes the show, but also really likes that it's live and that it is ephemeral and appointment viewing.
Yep.
And because we don't have too many of those, that they structure their week around the Tuesday, which is nice to hear. Yeah.
Well, I'm honored that Major Label Debut gets to dip a toe in that water. This has been a really fascinating. I mean, you did all the work of making the edit of the movie, but I really felt proximate to something really cool and interesting, and something that gets at something elemental that I think this show is always trying to find ways to get at. And it seems like what you're doing is exactly at the bullseye of that. And so it's just so cool to see the cut and experience it that way. And also, what a lovely time chatting about it. If you are listening to this episode, please mark on your calendar to check out the Fasterpiece Theater edition of The Doors.
Yeah, so it's, again, Museum of Home Video is every Tuesday night, starting at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. So for you, Graham, the show itself would start at 10:30 p.m., and the Fasterpiece thing will be like 30, 40 minutes into the show. And I don't know, if you like things such as MTV, classic MTV, and Comedy Central, and channel changing as a vibe, you will probably enjoy Museum of Home Video. So we have a Patreon where you can rewatch any episode. I have 5 years worth of weekly shows. There's a lot to swim in there around with. I'm a big proponent of switching off of the big corporate streamers and finding your own path. So support Patreon creators more, I guess is what I'm saying.
I agree. And I will return to the subject of food, the most important subject of all, the potatoes, etc. But specifically to ask you, by way of concluding, well, you were ripping out this Doors Fasterpiece Theater edit. What were you eating, drinking, smoking, or craving?
Definitely smoking weed. What kind of weed? I'm not really too particular on, because I think that the indica sativa divide doesn't exist anymore because they've all been crossbred enough times. It's just weed. Drink wise, I make myself enormous, like construction site tin cup mugs of just herbal tea or barley tea from the Japanese market. And food, I tend to batch cook I work from home. I tend to batch cook for myself. So it was probably a stir fry or a chicken soup or lentil.
That sounds like a very wholesome diet.
I don't keep dessert in the house because I'll eat it. And I'm gonna be 50 before you know it. And like, I have to start thinking about that stuff. So I've cut out dessert. I don't keep bread in the house because I will eat it if it's around. Yeah. Lentils. You'll be surprised what you can do.
I'll take that under advisement. Bret, thank you so much, not just for being so generous with your time, talking to me and listening to me talk about my theory of how NFL football can tell us about the collective subconscious, which I know everyone is really interested in and will definitely make the final cut. But thank you for cutting down Oliver Stone's chaotic masterpiece, The Doors, into an even more chaotic masterpiece of your own. I loved watching it. I loved thinking about it, and I really love talking about it. And just thank you so much and great work. That is my conversation with Bret Berg from the Museum of Home Video and the American Genre Film Archive, and more about his edit of the Doors movie and about the Doors movie and the Doors. And well, you heard the conversation. You don't need me to sum it up quite so quickly. Something they say in radio is tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. And I think we really structure the podcast that way. You know, there's the intro, and then there's the conversation, which is the real thing, and then there's the outro, and it's happening right now. And sometimes I don't know what to say here since it's so redundant, and I end up getting meta. Anyway, I had a really great time talking to Bret. I had a really great time watching his edit and learning about the way he sees the world and sees the Doors movie and the art-commerce intersection and the whole thing. It's not our usual conversation about a major label debut. I don't know, we're feeling this out as we go, right? And we're sort of finding what it is that interests us and what about art in general the show is really trying to understand or get to the bottom of, or at least, you know, it's a tree that we're trying to bark up. And talking to Bret was like another thing that felt like it clarified it for me. I don't even know how to describe it in words. I guess if I did, then we would just do that. Every once in a while, we do an episode. There's one coming up with Nels Klein, which is another one we recorded the interview a few months ago. Just right away, I knew that's the kind of conversation I want to have on the show. And this conversation with Bret was just such a conversation from a whole different angle. So I can't thank him enough, not just for coming on the show and having that great talk, but also for spending the time to edit the Doors movie down for us. and for hosting it. Like I said in the intro, when I was telling you what I was going to tell you, watch it on September 2nd. It's at the Museum of Home Video.com at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is 10:30 p.m. Toronto Eastern Standard Time. That's when it's streaming at the aforementioned website, museumofhomevideo.com. Thank you so much for listening to Major Label Debut. The show is produced, as always, but even more so, since this is a bonus episode, so even more work for these guys, by John Paul Bullock and the great Josh Hook. Our music is by my friend Greg Alsop. You can find us on all of the various socials media. If you want to see my slack-jawed computer-using face for yourself, you can log on to YouTube and find Major Label Debut. That's the end of the show. That's the end of the spiel. Major Label Debut will return with more tales from the intersection of art and commerce on behalf of the Lizard King. So long.